Well, welcome back to the Montana Real Estate Channel. I'm Craig Cyphers. I work with my third generation realtor daughter, Erica, at Exit Realty Bitterroot Valley South. And we like to bring you information about real estate in the state of Montana. Oftentimes we go out into the various communities and do a video so that you can see the homes, the landscape, the landmarks, give you some price points on various neighborhoods. But today we're going to be in studio. We're going to be talking about the inspection process, which is an important element of putting a real estate deal together. And we invite you to take a look at all of our videos, community videos, and also informational videos with regards to things like covenants and HOAs, mortgages, and even property management. So today I'm going to be talking with Russel Hews with Hews Home Inspections, and we're going to talk about the inspection process. So if we can help you with real estate, please give us a call, send us a text, send us an email. All the information that you need is in the description down below, and we look forward to helping you if we can. And so let's dive right into home inspection. Russ, thanks for taking some time and speaking with me about the home inspection process. When I put a house under contract, of course, one of the major contingencies is going to have a professional like yourself and to go in and do a general inspection on the property. And, that way we know what kind of condition the property's in, and then we can have further negotiation if necessary, depending on what we find. When do you get involved in the process, and tell me a little bit about what you do?
Okay. Well, first of all, Craig, I want to thank you for having me here today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you for the partnership that we've had for years, you and Erica. And I appreciate you referring me to your clients. And, my goal is to not only provide my clients, but you with very good service. And so getting to your question, when does the process of the home inspection, I am actually coming in. You guys work very hard at getting your prospective clients. And so when you get an approved offer, you've already got a lot of work ahead. And part of that process is scheduling a home inspection. So, and that's where I come in.
Right.
When you've already got, or sometimes agents will call me when they're making an offer and they'll find out what my schedule is so that they can put in their offer. We'll have this home and say the offer is going to be approved, and then they'll have a home inspection completed within whatever date it is, 4 or 5 days away or whatever. So they're calling me to find out if they get this approved offer, would I be able to do an inspection by this date? So that's always a good thing.
Right, scheduling.
To schedule. So that's the first key is scheduling.
Right, because, and just to interrupt there, that scheduling and that contingency, we want to be sure that we've got time to get you in.
Correct.
You've got an opportunity to adequately assess the property, and then you put together, the report.
Correct.
And we only have so many days. Usually it's a 5 o'clock on a certain date that we have to, if we have a problem, we want to be able to address that in some sort of inspection notice to the seller.
That's correct. And
okay.
so I have clients call me, which are referred to mainly by agents like yourself, and I always ask them, what time schedule they're on. And some of them say, well, I'm not really in a hurry, or closing it as a month and 30 days or it's 45 days out. And I always recommend that they get the home inspection as soon as possible.
Right.
Because then they can have that information and do what you're dealing. If there's things to be dealt with before the contingencies or the closing date, that can happen. Which really, where I find agents and clients really anxious, and even sellers, is on these really fast moving deals where they call me and they need an inspection they need the report within 3 or 4 days.
Right.
Well, do I do that? Yes, but you can feel the tension.
Yes.
And it doesn't give much time to make any other negotiations or corrections if that's necessary.
Right.
Now, as far as a report goes, we're not, I want to kind of talk about the myth. So there's been a lot of home inspections waived here in the last few years, and you're aware of that, Craig.
Right. Yeah. It just makes it easier for the seller because they know they're not going to have an issue moving forward. Because in the past, particularly pre-COVID, before the market got super hot, and it was definitely not a seller's market per se.
Right.
If there were people who would get out of deals on that inspection contingency.
Right.
So if you remove that contingency, and the other one, of course, was having cash.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying.
So those two things happened, and a lot of inspections were waived because, like you say, sellers and sellers agents are thinking that the home inspection report, they want to sell this property as is, that simple. They want a cash deal. They want a smooth process, which is fine, and that's their right. But the inspection report that I perform, the purpose of that report isn't to take it to the other agent and then negotiate the price down. And that's the myth that a lot of sellers have, that, hey, the reason they're getting a home inspection is so that they can negotiate this price down that we've already settled on.
Right.
And so I want to overcome that by saying, no, that's not the primary purpose of the home inspection. Now, does that happen? Yes, that does happen.
Right.
But there's also sellers that will sell and allow the home inspection to proceed with a contingency on there that they're not going to renegotiate their price even with an inspection.
Right.
Which is fine because my job as a home inspector is to go on site for my client and my agent at a professional level, and my experience and the standards of practice that I operate on in conducting a thorough home inspection is to gather as much information as I can on that property, on all the components of that property, come back to the office and compile a report that's easy to understand,
right.
Thorough, but easy to understand. You read reports all the time, and I write reports all the time, but most of my clients, some of them they might see one or two in their lifetime, right?
Right.
Some of the more experienced ones, 4 or 5, but
yeah,
they're not looking at them regularly like I are. So it has to be easy to understand and in language that the client can understand, so that when they receive that report that I compile, that I provide information.
Right.
So it's like your body when you go to the doctor and you have a physical. You got a lot of components and a lot of moving parts and functioning parts in your body.
Right.
And so you don't necessarily, you can look at your body and it looks fine, but we need to look a little deeper, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what a home inspection is.
And we do have an example of the home inspection that's in this video. So as we're talking here, you could be scrolling through that home inspection as well.
Yeah, I think Craig grabbed one of on my website, which is Hews.
Right.
At HewsHomeInspections.com.
HewsHomeInspections.com.
Yeah, and that's Hews. That's Hews.
There you go. Right. Yes.
But anyway, so I have 6 sample inspections on there because there's a lot of the one I think that we put on your site is just a standard residential one.
Right.
But there's multifamily on there. There's log homes. There's different types of inspections on there that people can look at, but they're real inspections.
Yeah.
But so my job is to go gather all this information, to put it in a report again, so that the client can review this report with their agent, and they're gaining, just like going to the doctor and getting a checkup.
Right.
The doctor's checking all these things that you don't see, and then he calls you back in the office and sits you down, and he gives you the results of your physical exam and your blood work and this and that.
Right.
Well, that's similar to what a home inspection is we're going in and examining that home.
Right.
At a deeper level, and then we give you the results of that examination so that you can make good decisions, whatever that looks like, moving forward.
Right.
So I always tell my clients that irregardless of the condition of the property from my report, nothing ever has to be fixed by the seller for the transaction of a property.
Sure.
So,
But you'd like to know, as a buyer, kind of what you're looking at down the road.
correct.
Potentially.
So say either you're in or you're not, where say the seller isn't gonna negotiate the price from the home inspection. It doesn't really make any difference whether it's that or whether it's the buyer is still under negotiation. There again, it's up to the buyer and the agent like yourself, Craig, and your daughter Erica, to determine, is there something in this report that we were unaware of that's serious,
Right.
that we can go back to the sellers who may be unaware of this condition,
Right.
and say, hey, we have this condition that's going to possibly might be rather expensive to fix. We might need to get someone to look at this and give us some estimates.
That's why if we can get in there earlier, then we can see and maybe get some estimates.
Correct. That's the advantage of getting it done earlier, because you know as well as I do, the building industry here in the Bitterroot Valley of Missoula, trying to get people to show up.
That's all over the state.
Yeah, it's like pulling teeth.
Right.
They don't even answer your call or return your calls, right?
Right.
So the earlier you can get this information, the better it is for the buyer and the buyer's agent. Now, say we're in a condition to where the seller is not going to negotiate, which is fine, or the seller is, but you're not going to ask for these items to be fixed by the seller. You and your client are happy with this is their dream home.
Right.
You know, they don't want to nickel dime it to death and take the chance of losing the property over asking for something to be fixed. And so so what this does is the report, the client can then look at that report and start prioritizing off of the report what items need attention.
Right.
And what they might want to fix first.
Right. Yeah.
So there again, not that nothing has to be fixed for them to move into it.
Yeah, because it's, presumably it's inhabited by the seller right now anyway.
That is correct. So I would say in my reports, and you're very familiar with this, so safety hazards are like a big item, whether the seller takes care of them or whether the buyer takes care of them afterwards. Safety issues, and I think of a couple electrical issues.
Okay.
Those are safety issues. You're living in that home, you have guests in that home, and you want the electrical system of that home to be functioning properly, right?
Yes, right.
And so all electrical issues in my report come up as a safety hazard.
Right. And they're noted in there. You've got a little symbol so that you can go through it and see what's a safety hazard.
Right. So in my reporting, and what the client will get, and what you're familiar, you've looked at tons of my reports,
right,
is I have symbols. So say it'll have a red cross, which is a safety issue,
right,
and then it'll say bare electrical wires are exposed. This is a shock and safety issue. Recommend. My reports just always have recommendations. Doesn't say, hey, this has to be fixed.
Right.
But it'll recommend that a licensed electrician correct that issue.
Right.
So, and then there'll be a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just not wording. In my reporting,
yes,
in all the phases of the reporting, there'll be pictures of the existing condition of that home, from the roof to the crawl space to the exterior to the interior, room by room. There'll be all those pictures, and then there's categories, exterior, roof, attic, everything's categorized out. Electrical, all of that is individual categories. And then when I find what are called deficiencies or concerns, then I take a picture of that item.
Right.
And then it'll tell you what the deficiency or concern is. It'll tell you the potential problem of that concern, and then it'll give a recommendation. So another safety issue would be that I see a lot is handrails and guardrails.
Right.
The spacing is too far apart. There's standards for all this stuff, right? It's not my opinion. There's standards.
Yeah,
for
codes.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not a code inspector.
Right.
But there are standards, and so like on railings or guardrails that are above 30 inches, the standard is not any more than 4-inch gap.
Right.
Right. And I see them with foot gaps.
Sure.
And that means your little people or your little pets can slip through and get injured. So that comes up as a safety issue.
Right.
So if the house is built that way, right? I mean, a lot of homes, you see homes that are built this way.
Sure.
And they might be 20, 30 years old.
Yeah.
Now, you are probably not going to go, and your client are going to go and say that and go back to the seller and say, hey, you need to fix these guardrails because they're No, the house is built that way. It's been that way for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
But my client is made aware of the issue and the concern, and then the client can decide if they want to address that issue, if that's important to them,
right,
and get it corrected.
Sure.
So that's what. So see, none of that involved the seller readjusting their price.
Right.
Right.
And presumably, all of those kinds of things typically are accounted for when the home is they do a market analysis, the seller agent, and it's priced accordingly. Yeah. You'd want to think so, and that's of course where negotiation can come into play.
Right.
Depending on which, what the issue is.
Right. So you mentioned something that I'm a very big advocate for, and like you say, they've been waiving buyer inspections for the last few years, although that's starting to slow down a bit. I think you see.
Sure.
As it gets a little tighter for the sellers here.
Right.
But I'm a real advocate of sellers getting a home inspection prior to listing.
Sure.
And let me tell you why. Because I think it's a respecter of everybody's time. You know how much time you have in with a client, whether you're working on the seller's end or the buyer's end, because you work both ends.
Right. And
to me, as a home inspector, a seller is very wise, and I do them, but it's the minority of them.
Right.
It's like coming and getting a physical, a checkup. And so the seller has me come in, I do the same home inspection report, right? Or the home inspection and produce a report for that seller. Then they're able to look at the health of their home.
Yeah.
They can share that with their agent. And as you've already stated, an experienced agent will see that and they'll price the house accordingly, and it removes all the butterflies at the end of the last 2 or 3 weeks of the sale. When I normally come in,
right,
there's butterflies on both sides, and I'm walking in, everybody's wondering what the home inspector is going to find. It removes all of that,
right?
Because say the furnace is 35 years old in this home, and but the seller knows that, and they disclose that, and then I come in and I do a report and I inform my client, hey, the furnace is 35 years old. That's beyond the average life expectancy of a furnace in the United States is 20 years. Mm-hmm. So that's beyond the life expectancy. Yes, it's still functioning,
right?
But it's beyond the life expectancy. I would recommend a qualified HVAC contractor come in and do a full evaluation on that furnace. So you, as being the buyer's agent, could look at that and go, wow, this furnace is looking like it needs to be replaced. It's approximately $3,500, which is a pretty good chunk of money.
Right.
And then you can go back to the seller and say, hey, this furnace looks like it needs to be replaced. We've got a bid of $3,500. And then the seller and the seller's agent went, wait a minute. We had this home inspection. We've adjusted our price. We've already allotted for that amount.
Right.
And everybody rests in peace over that. That's my opinion. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's valuable, and it's a matter of oftentimes buyers will go ahead and get their own anyway.
Correct.
And I do think it does help in terms of pricing a home and knowing where problems could exist.
Right.
And if you use that home inspection, and you have it out there in front of them, it kind of takes away that ability of the buyer, certainly, to say negotiate it, because you say, hey, we gave you this along with, and we do have, of course, our property owner's disclosure statement, which is designed to disclose adverse material facts that are known, but to have an inspection already in hand, like you mentioned, it just facilitates the sale and makes it easier that everybody is, informed about the condition of the property when you get involved in the transaction. So I advocate it. it's just one of those things where lots of sellers say, well, I just don't want to take, have the expense. Let the buyer, bring it to us. So that's one of the things that happens. So from a seller standpoint, lots of our sellers don't do that. Some do. And it kind of depends on what the market is as well.
Well, and like you say, the market's been so hot. So not only have buyers inspections been waived, but sellers aren't doing them.
Yeah.
But we're moving back into an area, again, most of the time that I do a seller's inspection, they're people who have everything in order. They're kind of perfectionists.
Yeah.
And they just want to know.
Yeah.
But it also takes, I think, this is my personal opinion, if the seller does that, now the buyer is still going to get their own home inspection, even if they review that, because the inspector,
sometimes,
the inspector isn't going to stand behind that home inspection for a non-client.
Right.
So the buyers are probably going to get their own independent inspection, which is recommended. But it takes away that sometimes, Craig, that what's the seller trying to hide?
Yes.
Type of a thing. And that's why I think when I come in on most of my inspections, not that necessarily the sellers are trying to hide anything, but they're just unaware. And so there's this nervousness of, what is Russell going to find in this home inspection that I might have to renegotiate that I'm not necessarily aware of? And I could say one of them is radon.
Right. Yeah, radon can be a big deal. I mean, well, generally speaking, and when we start talking numbers, it's kind of dependent upon when you're watching this in terms of time. I mean, this is not 1968. We'll tell you that right now. But, roughly $2,500, $2,600. I mean, it depends on the size of the home and all of those sorts of things. But, yeah, that's no small item. And it is an adverse material fact.
Yes, it is.
And so if somebody doesn't already have a test in hand, that's going to be something that you're going to complete, and almost without exception, depending on what the levels are. I mean, I've had some that are over the EPA recommended, and they'll just forego them because I think, what is it, 4.4? The point four.
No, excuse me, wrong. 4.0.
4.0 microcuries.
Correct.
And that's our EPA. Canada, totally different. And we actually have caves up in Boulder. They're radon caves. People pay to go sit in them.
Yeah. So what's funny is so there again, radon is a gas. It's an organic radioactive gas in the earth, right? It's coming out.
Right.
It's like carbon monoxide. You can't sense it with a human sense. You can't smell it, taste it, or sense it anyway.
Right.
And yet at certain levels, it is the second cause of lung cancer in the nation. Over 120,000 people die from radon poisoning a year.
Isn't that something?
So it is a big deal. And here's the thing. Montana is a zone 1 red radon state. So we have a lot of radon in this state. And for myself and my own inspections, which, doing radon testing is in addition to the home and I recommend it to all my clients. They don't, I'd say 90% of them take it.
Yes.
But because
so in our sample, we won't have radon. It's not in the sample, but that's something that you discuss, obviously, with the client.
Yes, I recommend each of my clients, unless it has an active radon system in it.
Yeah.
But even at that, an active radon system, EPA recommends every 5 years that be tested.
Sure.
So, radon testing needs to be monitored. Like I say, it's the second cause of lung cancer in the country.
Interesting.
And so half of my radon tests, Craig, that I do come in above the EPA standards.
Half of them, yeah.
So again, my job and what I'm trying to do in my home inspection is, it's value what you say.
Right.
My information that I gather needs to be valuable to my client and to my agent.
Right.
It's education, educating them on what's there. Radon is another form of that. Informing my clients, I talk, a lot of my clients are from out of state, and you know that.
Right.
And they're not familiar with radon. They might be moving from California or
Right.
Western Oregon or Western Washington, and they've never heard of radon before, right?
Right.
And so part of my job is educating and giving information to the client that you referred me to, and radon is one of them. So another thing about, so I'm charging anywhere from 125 to 150 for a radon test, and this is a short-term test
Right.
because the transaction period time is short.
Right.
Because you can do a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day radon test, which will give
Oh,
you
yeah.
a much better read, because radon levels are changing all the time.
Yes.
Day and night, they're changing.
Depends
all
on
the
whether the house has been, closed up and
Right.
what time of year and those
Yep,
sorts
the
of things.
weather, whether
Right.
it's sunny or raining, or is there snow on the ground, not snow. There's just all kinds of things. So
Right.
long term, but we can't do that in a real estate transaction. So
Right.
my radon tests conduct are a minimum of 48 hours and a maximum of 5 days. So I try to have, well, they're going to be set up a minimum of 48 hours, but I like
Right.
to have them in there 2 to 4 days is where I like to have my radon tests. And there's certain, the house needs to be closed up and things. We're trying to measure the air level inside the house, not outside the house.
Right.
But as you already stated, so for $125 purchasing this home, if the radon test comes in high, and you know this, Craig, 90% of the time the seller will allot the $2,500 or $3,000
Exactly.
to the buyer to cover the mediation necessary to bring the levels down.
Yes.
Right? To the EPA standards.
Right.
So there again, that's another valuable piece of information added to the home inspection, and then we can go to water testing, and there's different
Right.
there's different things one could add. Now there again, down here we have a lot of wells. A lot
That's
of
right.
properties that you guys sell are on wells.
Yes.
And so the lender requires that a neutral party do a water sample test. And that water sample test is a bacterial test. So it's testing for coliform and E. coli. It's a strike indicator test. It's really easy to fail it. You got to sterilize everything before you pull the water test. And that test is an $85 test. But the banks, if they're not paying cash for the homes, the lending institutions require the test come in absent of bacteria.
Right. And that's all we really know on that base test.
That is right.
We don't know if we've got arsenic in there.
No, we don't.
And
or lead, or
lead.
copper.
Right. And we do have some properties here locally in the Bitterroot Valley, for example, on the east side, that do have high arsenic in their wells. Now that can be mitigated, they can be treated for that.
Right.
So it's not the end of the world by any means, but you gotta know it's there.
It's good to know it before you make the purchase, right?
Right.
Because then you have a chance of the seller helping you mediate that problem so that they can sell their property, right?
Right.
And radon can be in your water too.
That's right. Yep.
So I've never done a radon test in water, but you can do so much testing on your well. I've done $5,000 tests on wells for everything. So you can spend as much money testing your water as you want. But for practical purposes, just getting a bacterial test. Now, if the bacterial test comes back positive, which you've sold enough property, so then they've got to bring in a well person to shock the well.
Yes.
Right. And so they want to kill all the bacteria.
Right.
And then they retest the well, and it tests absent, and the bank goes, okay, because the bank's not going to lend on the well if it has bacteria on the property, right?
Right.
So they get rid of that. The funny thing is EPA, or the water people of the federal government, they have standards on, or recommendations on that too, and they actually recommend that a homeowner shock their well every 5 years.
Yes.
Or shock the well every time there's a transfer of property.
Right.
Well, nobody does that. Nobody spends the time, because it's around $350 to shock a well.
Yeah.
Just a standard. And no one does that until they sell or have a approved offer like with you, and then the test comes back present then that's when they'll get shocked.
Yes.
And, you know. And
Right.
so,
That's on the practical side.
Yeah.
That does happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Well, you know, I wanted to get down to on the basics of it to go
Okay.
through with our subscribers and our clients so that we can give them an idea what to expect. So they'll give you a call. What I do is I give them your name. They give you a call and they make the appointment with you and you guys go through some paperwork.
Correct.
And you know, and then you go out and do the inspection. When you do an inspection, talk to me a little bit about the participation of the client, the buyer. Now, I don't go on inspections, and I don't know how often you see agents. I've been at this almost 40 years, and I've been there a couple of times, but I'm not an inspector, so I'm not going to give you my 2 cents about it because I've been at it long enough that I've got some ideas like what the roof appears to look like and things of that nature, but that's what your job is. And so I don't like to get in your way. It'll slow you down. And I think it's the same thing with the client though, isn't it?
Correct. So, you know, way back in the beginning when I started, there's lots of clients that want to be, you know, this might be their first or second home that they bought. They're paying me a good amount of money to do this inspection, and they want to be on the inspection and follow me around and ask questions. Well, when I was a young inspector, I used to do that until I found out, you know, the mechanics, when you take in the mechanic, it says, you know, the shop rate hours is at $90 an hour. If you're present, it's $180.
Right.
You know, and so that's kind of how it is with inspecting is really, when I'm on site, I'm looking at, you know, if I stand in a room like this, I'm looking and concentrating on so many components of the home, trying to compile a good, accurate information.
Right.
If I have a client, I'm looking in this room and then he's asking me something in the room, or he's asking me, well, what about the roof? Then my simple mind gets derailed and I started missing things in the report. And so I don't allow my clients to be with me on site.
Yeah.
When I'm doing the inspection. Now, my preferred method is when I'm done with the inspection, if the client is available, they can meet me at the end of the inspection and I can spend a half hour to 45 minutes walking through the property with the client and knowledgeably being able to discuss my concerns that I saw on that property and point them out right on site.
Right.
Before
they see
they
the
get the
report.
report.
Right.
Now, as far as agents go, like yourself, you've been at this for a long time, and I have some agents that show up, and they'll show up with their laptop, and they'll sit down and they'll work while I'm doing the inspection report.
Right.
Even sellers agents will do that sometimes because the sellers sometimes they're uncomfortable with having a stranger in their house.
Yeah, right.
Again, sometimes the agents will show up when I'm meeting with the client. So they'll show up and meet with me with the client, and both the agent and the client will spend a half hour, 45 minutes with me doing what I call a summary walkthrough on site.
Right.
And so everybody's kind of on the same page, and when they get the report, there's no surprises.
Right.
Now, half my clients are unable to do that, right? They're working or they're out of state or there's some reason that they can't do that. So as we've already said, my reports, and you've seen them, they're pretty thorough. They're pretty lengthy.
Very thorough.
They can be overwhelming actually to
Yeah.
a person who's not used to looking at
Yeah,
them, right?
that's right. Yeah.
And so I'm aware of that.
You might get it and go, oh, this place is a junk heap.
Yeah, look at, there's 100 issues listed here. I need to go find another house, and I have to go, wait a minute. No, this is just all standard maintenance issues thing here that, you know, but anyway.
Yeah.
So instead of me just sending the report out and letting it land on the client and giving them a heart attack and then calling you and saying, Craig, I got to back out of this deal. Look at all this that's wrong with it.
Yeah.
And then have you try to put the deal back together.
Right.
I will come back, compile that report. I send a link to my client with the report attached, and I get bounced back to my email that client received it in their email. I pick up the phone. I call the client, ask them if this is a good time to talk and to go over the home inspection report. Most of them are very excited. They so they'll sit at their computer. I have them pull the report up, while I'm on the phone with them, and I go through that whole entire report with them right on the phone, and I'll answer any questions that they have.
Yeah.
So I do that a lot, like I say, because a lot of people are working or they're out of state and they're not able to be there.
Right.
But I don't want to just send them this overwhelming report.
Oh, yeah, right.
Leave them on their own.
Well, and that's why you get referrals from us, because it's good stuff, and you're thorough and professional. And so when our clients get that inspection notice and they have the opportunity to talk with you, we all are on the same page, and it just takes a lot of problems out of the picture. And it's something that's very important to us. Well, I know our viewership has a relatively short attention span.
Like me. That's why I can't be asked questions during the inspection.
That's right. That's right. So, but the inspections is an important element of the transaction, and we appreciate you, Russ. And remember, all the contact information for us is below, and we'd like to put your website address in there if people want to do a little more research. And of course, Russ is not the only inspector in the world. He happens to be one of our chosen ones. We as agents provide a list to our clients, and so if you're an inspector out there, know that we're just talking about the general elements of a inspection, and know that if you're also a client and you've got somebody working on it. And Russ, what is you have a geographic area?
Correct. I work like you do. I'm going to work Western Montana. I mean, I've gone as far as, I haven't had to go to Polson. Well, I do go to Polson. I haven't had to go to Kalispell.
Okay.
But I've gone halfway to Kalispell. And I've gone, I go all the way down to the Idaho borders.
Sure.
I've actually even gone into Idaho because I'm licensed to inspect in all the states, or certified to do that. But mainly it's in Western Montana. I do Missoula and up to St. Ignatius and St. Regis, and I'm going to Darby tomorrow on a home inspection, Darby and south of Darby and Sula. And we live in a rural area, and you guys work hard to get your clients. And I'm not gonna say, if you refer me and you need this inspection, I'm gonna say, well, I'm not gonna go there. I go there. Now, there are times that I have to charge mileage. I don't charge time and stuff, but there's sometimes
you got
I have to cover.
You're not going to go out to Harlowtown or Laurel, probably,
right?
Which is part of our market too. By the way, we have offices across the state of Montana. Russ, thanks a million. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing you again on our next video on the Montana Real Estate Channel, brought to you by the Cyphers Family Real Estate. We've been helping folks move into and around the state of Montana since 1966, and we look forward to hearing from you. If you've got some comments, leave them down below, and we can get back to you. If you have some questions for Russ, we can do that too. Thanks again.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.